The human mechanic fixed broken toys for free. One day, the alien kid brought his mother. The workshop was an anomaly on Station 734. The rest of the habitat was sterile, all filtered air and silent, antiseptic gray bulkheads. Giovanni's shop was a pocket of warm, chaotic life. It smelled of mineral oil, the hot bite from the plasma torch, and a faint, sharp tang of industrial solvents. Tools, both gleaming high-tech drivers and ancient, worn-down human wrenches, hung in disorganized constellations on the walls. Giovanni himself was at his workbench, a man who seemed crafted from the same solid, practical materials as his tools. His dark hair and neat beard were a stark contrast to the bright, alien child sitting opposite him. He held a tiny, complex piece of machinery in his calloused hands, turning it over under the bright green articulated lamp. "So the gravimeter is fluctuating," Giovanni said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. He pointed with a small pick. "Right here, this capacitor is fried." Kale, the Sidonian child, just watched, his own small green hands clasped on the bench. His large, solid black eyes reflected the lamplight. He had been coming to Giovanni's shop for 3 rotations, at first just staring from the doorway, then bringing broken data pads, and eventually his prized toy, this intricate grav racer. Giovanni glanced at the child. Kale didn't speak, not to him, but he communicated just fine. Giovanni had learned the subtle twitch of his pale green antennae, the slight tilt of his head. "It's an easy fix," Giovanni assured him, "but we need to reroute the power. If I just replace it, the same thing will happen." He worked with a speed that was deceptively casual. His broad, strong hands, which looked like they were made for hauling engine blocks, moved with the precision of a microsurgeon. He didn't just solder the new part. He added a small, hand-coiled wire. A fuse, he'd call it, though the technology was archaic by station standards. He powered it on. The toy floated an inch off the bench, humming a smooth, perfect blue. Kale's antennae shot forward, and a wide, gleeful smile split his face. "There you go," Giovanni said, pushing it gently toward him. "Good as new." Kale grabbed the toy, his smile his only thanks, and scrambled off the stool. He ran from the shop. Giovanni chuckled, turning to wipe his hands on a rag, the interaction already fading as he mentally moved to his next project, a stubborn agricultural drone's logic board. 5 minutes later, the chime over his shop door rang again. Kale was back, but he was not alone. He was dragging a Sidonian woman by the hand. She was tall, with the same vibrant green skin, but her hair was a short, sharp coppery red. Her body was a series of dramatic curves poured into a form-fitting white and gray uniform that spoke of high status or military function. She moved with a rigid, brittle grace, and as she stepped into the workshop, her solid black eyes widened. Her antennae, which Giovanni noted were longer and more slender than her son's, flattened against her red hair. Her mouth, a pale rose, formed a perfect O of shock. Giovanni got it. She saw the grime, the clutter, the primitive human tools. She was looking at a caveman's den. "Kale, Vrekta, what are you doing?" Her voice was a controlled melodic contralto, but it was stretched thin with embarrassment and anger. "Let go. We are leaving. I apologize for my son, human." She tugged Kale, but the boy planted his feet. He pointed a small green finger, not at Giovanni, but at his mother. "She's broken too," Kale said, his voice clear and high. "Fix her." The words hung in the oil-scented air. The woman Philara froze, her shock replaced by a wave of pale, visible mortification. "Kale, you will not," she hissed, yanking his arm. "Come, now." "But he fixes... now." Philara turned to leave, pulling the child so hard he stumbled. She was halfway to the door when a sudden, violent spasm seized her. She gasped, a sound like a choked bird, and her free hand flew to her chest, grabbing the pristine white uniform. She stumbled against a shelf of heavy components, which rattled in protest. Her face contorted, not in embarrassment, but in pure, white-hot agony. Giovanni's easygoing tinkerer demeanor evaporated. It was replaced by a sharp, diagnostic intensity. He moved from behind the bench in 2 long strides, his body instinctively interposing between her and the hard edge of a fabrication unit. "Ma'am?" She flinched from his voice, from his proximity, trying to straighten. Pride and pain warred on her face. "I am." "No, you're not," he said. His voice was no longer a rumble, it was a command. He put a hand on her elbow, not for comfort, but for leverage and balance. "Chair, now." He guided her, her body rigid as stone, to the heavy-duty stool he used for clients. She sank onto it, her breathing a series of shallow, rattling gasps. Her black eyes were squeezed shut. Cale watched, his toy racer forgotten, his face a mask of silent terror. Giovanni moved to the shop's entrance, his back to her. He hit the maglock on the door, plunging the shop into the more intimate, focused light of his work lamps. He turned, leaning back against the locked door, folding his solid arms. He was no longer a friendly mechanic. He was a diagnostician, and his patient had just been rolled into the garage. "All right," Giovanni said, his voice quiet but absolute. "School's out. Tell me about the engine." Philara's eyes snapped open. The pain was receding, but the insult was fresh. "The engine?" "The thing in your chest that's failing," Giovanni said, his tone blunt, all trace of pleasantry gone. He was in diagnostic mode. "Is the failure a slip or a stall? Does it knock when you exert, or is it a steady degradation? What's the power source, and how's it regulated?" She stared at him, her Sidonian sensibilities reeling. He was speaking of her body as if it were one of Cale's toys, a piece of faulty machinery. Her people's physician spoke in hushed, reverent tones of biosymbiosis and organic integrity. This was butchery. "That is none of your concern," she said, her voice ice, though a tremor ran through it. She tried to stand. "Sit down," Giovanni said. It was not a request. He hadn't moved from the door, but his presence filled the small shop. "Your son brought you here. He thinks I can fix you. I can't do that until I know what's broken." The pain was a cold, familiar fist inside her, but his words were a new, sharp intrusion. "What is broken," she said, each word a chip of glass, "is a Mark IV biomechanical heart, Sidonian military grade. It is obsolescent. I was an officer. My own specialists, the finest in the sector, have declared it irreparable." Giovanni's dark, kind eyes narrowed. The beard made his face look softer than it was. His expression was all analytical. "Irreparable," he repeated. "Not failing, not damaged. Irreparable. That's a passive word. That's a word politicians use, not engineers." He pushed off the door and crossed to his workbench, pushing aside Cale's toy. He grabbed a complex, human-made diagnostic tool, a mess of wires, polished metal probes, and a scarred handheld screen. He held it out. "Where's the diagnostic port?" Philara recoiled. "That is restricted information, and that primitive device, it would never interface." "It doesn't need to," Giovanni said, his patience wearing thin. "I built it. It doesn't read Sidonian code. It reads power. It reads flow, voltage, resonance, and thermal output. The universe runs on the same rules, lady. Physics doesn't care what language you speak." Another tremor hit her, weaker this time, but it stole her breath. It was a cold stall, a hiccup in the rhythm of her life. She looked at her son, Cale, who was watching them with those huge, terrified, silent eyes. His faith in this man was absolute. Her faith in everything was gone. "It will do you no good," she whispered. But she unsealed a small panel on the side of her uniform just over her ribs. Her vibrant green skin was pale in the lamp's glow. A small data port, flush with her skin, was visible just below her left breast. Giovanni nodded, all business. He knelt beside her, his proximity a palpable wave of heat and a scent she couldn't place, soap and hot metal. It was deeply, unsettlingly real. He brought the probe to the port. "This won't hurt," he murmured. "It's just a passive reader." He touched the probe to the port. He didn't look at her. He looked at the handheld screen. The data that scrolled by was encrypted nonsense, a stream of Sidonian characters. But he ignored them. He was watching a simple, oscillating waveform at the bottom of the screen. A heartbeat. He watched it for a long, silent minute. Philara's breathing was shallow. She was intensely aware of his broad shoulder near her knee, the focused heat of his attention. He frowned, tapping the screen. "That's not right," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I told you, it is failing." "No," Giovanni said, his voice dropping. He looked up and his dark eyes met her solid black ones. The intensity in his gaze made her antennae twitch. "It's not failing. This isn't a breakdown. This is a restriction." He tapped the screen, showing her the wave. "See that? Every 5th cycle, there's a dip, a clean, precise, programmed dip. This thing isn't broken. It's being governed. It's being throttled." He unplugged the probe and stood, turning from her, his expression grim. "The question isn't what's broken, Philara. The question is, Who has the remote? The shop seemed to shrink. The whir of the station's distant air scrubbers was the only sound. Filara's face, already pale, lost another shade of color. Her antennae flattened completely. "You are mistaken," she said, her voice brittle. "That is not possible." "I'm a mechanic," Giovanni said, turning back to her. He tossed the diagnostic tool onto his bench with a clatter. "My entire life is about one thing, finding the problem. I don't care about the why, I care about the how. And how this is working is, something is telling your heart to fail, on a schedule." He crossed his arms, his gaze unforgiving. "This isn't a failure, it's an order. But the digital signal it's wrapped in Sidonian encryption I can't even scratch. It's masking the real problem." "And what is that?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "The mechanics," he said. "The physical parts. I can't hear the engine because someone's got the radio on too loud." He walked to a different cabinet, one filled with more delicate-looking tools. He pulled out a device that looked like a doctor's stethoscope, but with a long, needle-thin silver probe at the end, connected by a heavy cable to a small amplifier. "I need an analog reading." "Analog? I need to listen to it," he said. "With this, a vibroacoustic sensor, it'll let me hear the physical mechanism, the gears, the valves, the knock I asked about." He held it up. "But to do that, I need to put this sensor on the device, directly." Filara stared at the tool, then at him. She understood. The implant was in her chest. The port on her ribs was for data. The implant itself was beneath. "You would have to unseal my uniform," she said, the word stiff. Yes, his expression was neutral, professional. "That is not," she fumbled. "In my culture, such a thing, it is a violation." "In my culture," Giovanni said, his voice very quiet, "we call it surgery. And I'm not a doctor, but right now I'm the only one in this room with a toolbox." He didn't force her. He just stood there, holding the sensor, waiting. The silence was agonizing. Kale had crept over and was now hiding behind a stack of power cells, watching. Filara looked at her son. She looked at the grimy, calloused hands of the man in front of her. He fixed broken things, and she was definitively broken. She took a deep, shuddering breath, turn around. Giovanni did without hesitation, giving her his back. Filara's hands trembled. This was more shaming than the pain, more invasive than the failure. The uniform was sealed with a pressure lock. She placed her hand over the Sidonian crest on her collar and pressed. With a faint hiss, the white and gray material parted down the middle, separating, revealing the pale, luminous green skin of her throat, her collarbone, and the upper swell of her breasts. The Mark IV implant was not visible, save for a faint hairline scar and a slight, metallic hardness just over her heart. "You may proceed," she said, her voice strained. She hated the weakness in it. Giovanni turned. His eyes did not waver. They did not stray. They looked at the scar and then at his tool. He moved with that same deliberate, professional calm. He knelt before her again. "This will be cold," he warned. He brought the sensor up. His other hand, the large, warm, calloused one, rose to steady her. His fingers brushed her bare shoulder, just above the line of the parted uniform. Filara gasped. It was not from cold. His touch was like a brand. It was rough, but sure. It was not sexual, it was possessive. It was the touch of a craftsman claiming his materials. Her skin flared, and her antennae quivered, standing straight up. His gaze remained locked on his work. He pressed the metal probe to the scar over her heart. It was, as he said, cold. But his fingers brushing the sensitive skin just below her breast to hold the sensor steady were a furnace. Filara's black eyes were wide, fixed on the ceiling. She was rigid, her body trapped between the invasive agony of her implant and the overwhelming, terrifying intimacy of his touch. Giovanni closed his eyes, an earpiece in. He was listening. "There," he breathed, a wisp of air. "There it is." He adjusted the sensor, his thumb brushing the lower curve of her breast. Filara's breath hitched, a sound she couldn't contain. He didn't seem to notice. "A misfire," he murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. "A physical hesitation. It's not a choked fuel line. It's a relay, a physical switch being magnetically pulled." He opened his eyes and looked at her, his face inches from hers. He was so close she could see the flecks of brown in his dark eyes. This isn't just a remote, Phylara, he said, his voice a low, horrified rumble. It's a leash. Phylara's brittle composure fractured. The word leash struck her with the force of a physical blow. She began to tremble, a reaction not from pain or cold, but from a truth she had buried under layers of Sidonian pride. You don't know what you are saying, she whispered, but the denial was tissue-thin. I know exactly what I'm saying, Giovanni said. He was still kneeling, his hand still on her, the sensor still in place. The intimacy of the position was forgotten, replaced by the grimness of his discovery. This is not a bug. This is not a failure. This is a feature. He leaned back, removing the sensor, and her skin instantly missed the heat of his hand. He stood, his face a mask of cold, quiet anger. He walked to his bench, picked up a simple, primitive stylus, and grabbed a spare datapad. He began to sketch. The digital signal I saw, he said, not looking at her, his voice hard. That's the governor. It chokes the power cycle. It creates the failure, the pain. It's designed to make you weak, to make you compliant, but it's just a warning. He turned the pad to her. He had drawn a simple schematic, part engine, part circuit. This, he said, pointing to a small circle, is the acoustic relay I just heard. The knock. This is the failsafe. If you ignore the digital signal, or if you try to block it, this relay is designed to slam shut, guided by a powerful localized magnetic pulse. It's not designed to choke you, Phylara. It's designed to stop the implant. Permanently. He set the pad down. It's a kill switch, a bomb collar. The words hung in the shop. Cale, hearing the change in tone, crept out from his hiding place and ran to his mother, burying his face in her lap. Phylara's hands, which had been clutching the stool, moved to her son's head, her fingers digging into his coppery red hair. The dam of her control broke. He told me it was to save my life, she choked out, the words ripped from her. After the skirmish at Cytrax, my heart was damaged. He said the Mark IV was experimental, a gift. Giovanni stated, it was not a question. Zarek, she spat, the name like poison, my ex-bond mate, a high-ranking officer in the Sidonian fleet. He is a man of control. The story tumbled out, a torrent of humiliation and fear. Zarek was powerful, possessive, and brilliant. The bonding had been a political merger. Her defection from it, taking their son, was a stain on his perfect record. He let me go, she said, her voice hollow. I thought he had finally relented, but it was a test. He let the leash out just to see if I would come to heel, and when I did not... He started pulling, Giovanni finished. The failures began. He recalled you, didn't he? Back to Sidonian space for your medical emergency. To the only specialists who could fix you. His specialists. They declared it irreparable, Phylara confirmed, shame and rage making her shake. They said it was obsolescent. They said I must return to SIDA, to his direct command for a full replacement. A replacement only he could authorize. And if you refused, Giovanni said, he'd just flip the switch. From governor to kill switch. He would not, she said, but her voice was weak. He would not kill me. He loves me in his way. That's not love, Phylara, Giovanni said, his voice flat. That's ownership. And he's not just controlling you. He's actively, physically killing you, bit by bit, to get what he wants. He's a monster. And this, he tapped his own chest, is a machine. And I hate machines that do a good job of a bad design. He looked at her, his dark eyes intense. He thinks his tech is perfect. He thinks it's undetectable, unbreakable. He's relying on his high-tech software and his fancy encryption. He grinned, but it was a cold, wolfish expression that was a world away from the warm smile he gave Cale. He's never met a human mechanic, Giovanni said. He's never had to deal with someone who knows how to use a hammer. He built a digital lock, but he forgot about the physical hinges. Phylara looked up, the tears on her face catching the lamplight. What? What do you mean? A hammer? You will break it? No, Giovanni said. Better. I'm going to jailbreak it. I'm going to do a full analog bypass. I'm going to sever the connection to his remote and his kill switch. His confidence was a tangible thing, a wall she could almost lean against. But her Sidonian logic, her lifetime of being told what was possible and what was not, fought back. You cannot, she insisted. The encryption is military grade. You said so yourself. I don't need to, Giovanni said, his eyes bright with a uniquely human problem-solving fervor. He was energized now, the challenge laid bare. I'm not going to hack his signal. I'm going to make the implant deaf. I'm going to build a physical shield, a Faraday cage, but for a magnetic pulse. I'm going to insulate the kill switch relay. He paced his shop, grabbing components, his hands moving with renewed purpose. He's using a remote signal, but the implant itself, the core Mark IV mechanism, it's a good design. It's a high-performance engine. It is obsolescent, she recited. It's not, Giovanni barked, turning on her. It's parallel. It's a combustion engine, not an electric one. Your people moved on, but this design, it's brilliant, it's powerful, it's just analog. And Zarek is using a cheap digital governor to throttle it. He's putting unleaded fuel in a race car. He held up a thin, flexible sheet of metallic-looking film. He's sending a stop order. I'm going to build a new dumb controller that only listens to you. It will be hardwired. It will take its cues from your body's own biofeedback, your adrenaline, your pulse, not from some remote signal. When you need power, it will give you power. The hope in her chest was so new, so fragile, it was almost more painful than the despair. You can do that here. Giovanni stopped, the tools in his hands. He looked at the clutter, at his grimy bench, then at her. His expression softened for a moment. This is not a Sidonian sterile bay, Phylara. It's going to be invasive, and it is dangerous. That kill switch relay, I have to expose it, and when I do, I will have to insulate it before the remote signal knows I'm there. If Zarek's system detects a tamper, he might just flip the switch. Phylara's blood ran cold. He would be alerted. Maybe, Giovanni said, but he thinks he's the only one with a key. He's not expecting a locksmith. The real danger is the physical part. To do this, I have to access the primary control manifold. The Mark IV was designed to be sealed, permanently. The access port is delicate. Where? She whispered. Giovanni's gaze was direct, unflinching. He didn't point. He didn't need to. It's located directly over your heart, Phylara, beneath the scar. It's sealed for a reason. Opening it, it's going to hurt, and it requires absolute precision. He set the tools on the bench next to her. A high-frequency debonder, fine-gauge wire, the metallic film, and a set of tools that looked more like a sculptor's than a mechanic's. He gave you a leash, Giovanni said, his voice low. I'm offering you a choice. I can cut it. But you have to trust me. You have to let me put my hands and my tools inside the most vulnerable part of you. He stepped back, giving her space. Your call. But if you say yes, we do it now, before he realizes his pet has slipped the collar. Phylara looked at Kale, who had fallen asleep at the base of the stool, his small hand clutching her leg. She looked at the man who saw her not as obsolescent or broken, but as a race car someone was deliberately destroying. She nodded, a single sharp movement. Good, Giovanni said. He took a heavy steel-reinforced bench and dragged it to the center of the room. He began, with grim purpose, to sterilize his tools in a high-intensity sonic cleaner. We're not going to a med bay, he said. We're doing this on my workbench. Lie down. This was not surgery. This was a violation. This was an act of profound, terrifying trust. Phylara lay on the hard, cold workbench. Giovanni had thrown a clean but stained cloth over it. Kale was asleep in the corner, bundled in Giovanni's own jacket, a small, protected island of peace. The shop's main lights were off, all illumination coming from the single, bright green articulated lamp, which Giovanni now angled down, bathing her in a focused clinical spotlight. This uniform, he said, his voice all business. It has to come off, at least the top half. Phylara's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't unseal the cuffs. He saw her struggle. It's okay. He moved to her side, and with a practiced, impersonal efficiency, he unsealed the cuffs and the side seams. He gently, firmly pulled the white and gray material off her shoulders, bearing her to the waist, save for the simple Sidonian undergarment she wore. He folded the uniform and placed it aside, like a mechanic clearing a housing. She was exposed. The lamp was hot, but she shivered. He was so close, she could smell the soap on his hands, the faint metallic scent of his skin. His dark, bearded face was a mask of pure, absolute concentration. I'm going to clean the area, he murmured. He took a solvent, and the pad was shockingly cold on her skin, just over her heart. She hissed. I know, he said. Stay with me. He was inches from her face. His breath fanned her cheek. He was sweating, small beads on his forehead. This was 50 Shades intensity, but it was not about pleasure. It was about power and trust and the raw, dangerous intimacy of the act. He was her mechanic. He was her surgeon. He was, for this moment, her master. "The access port is sealed with a biocompatible resin," he said, his voice a low rumble in her ear as he leaned in to see. "I have to use a high-frequency debonder to liquefy it. It will be intense. It will create a searing, vibrational heat." I understand," she stammered. "Phylara, look at me." She dragged her gaze from the ceiling to his face. His dark eyes were bottomless. "You cannot move," he said, "no matter what you feel. If you move, my hand slips. Do you understand?" She nodded, her throat tight. "Good." He activated the debonder. It made a high-pitched, almost inaudible whine. He brought the vibrating tip to her skin. Phylara's body arched off the table, a sound torn from her throat that was half agony, half release. The smell of hot, synthetic resin filled the air. It was a sharp, searing, vibrating pain that felt like it was unzipping her to her very bones. "Shit," he cursed, his voice tight. "I know, I'm sorry. Stay with me. Breathe, Phylara. Just breathe with me, in to out." His free hand, the big, calloused one, clamped onto her shoulder, holding her down, grounding her. His grip was impossibly strong, a human anchor in a sea of Sidonian pain. She focused on it. The pressure of his 5 fingers, the heat of his palm through her thin garment. She matched her breathing to his, a ragged, desperate rhythm. "Almost there," he grunted. The resin seal gave way, revealing a small, intricate manifold of glowing wires and delicate components beneath her skin. This was the Mark IV. This was her heart. "Okay," he panted, shutting off the tool. "That was the hard part." He picked up a different tool, a probe. "Now, the bypass. I'm going to apply a direct current to this relay. This is the jump. It will force the new connection and sever the old. This is the moment, Phylara. The second I do this, any remote monitoring Zarek has will flatline. He'll know." "Do it," she gasped, her body thrumming with adrenaline and the ghost of the pain. He nodded. "Don't move." He applied the tool. It wasn't pain this time. It was power. A jolt of pure, uncontrolled energy flooded her system. Her back arched again, her head thrown back, her antennae standing bolt upright. Her entire body lit up with a sensation so profound, so overwhelming, it was almost ecstasy. She felt her heart, her real heart, kick into a new, powerful, unbound rhythm. The governor was gone. "Giovanni," she screamed, the name a prayer. His hand was still on her shoulder, his grip unbreakable. "I'm here. I've got you. It's working." And then the shop's door alarm shrieked, a high, piercing priority override. The sound was a violation, slicing through the hyper-focused intimacy of the workshop. A violent slam echoed as the maglock was blown and the door slid open, blasting the shop with the sterile white light of the corridor. 3 figures stood silhouetted against it. Giovanni cursed, a low, savage sound. He instinctively shielded Phylara's body with his own, his hand still clamped over the open, delicate manifold in her chest. The figures stepped inside. The 2 on the flanks were Sidonian military guards, their white and gray armor immaculate. But the man in the center, he was tall, severe, and wore the uniform of a high-ranking fleet officer. His coppery red hair was slicked back, his features sharp, and his solid black eyes, so like Kale's, were chips of cold obsidian ice. "Zarek," Phylara breathed, the name a wisp of terror. Zarek's gaze swept the room, his lip curling in disgust at the primitive tools, the grime. His eyes landed on the sleeping form of his son, and a flicker of something crossed his face. Then his gaze fell on the workbench. On Phylara exposed, her uniform in a heap. On the human, his hands on her, his body covering hers. Zarek's face contorted. It was not just anger. It was a profound, visceral disgust, an ideological revulsion. The animal had touched his property. "So," Zarek said, his voice a cold, melodic hum that vibrated with contained rage, "this is the animal you've replaced me with, a primitive, living in his own filth." "Get out!" Giovanni snarled, his voice a low growl. He didn't move, his hand still pressed to Phylara's chest, covering the open port. "You are touching Sidonian military property, human," Zarek said. His hand moved to the Sidonian energy weapon holstered at his hip. He drew it, the movement fluid and practiced. The weapon was long, elegant, and deadly. I gave you one warning, Phylara. I told you to come home. You chose this. He pointed the weapon not at Phylara, but at Giovanni. Step away from the Mark IV unit. It is the property of the Sidonian fleet, and she, he said, his gaze raking over Phylara with cold ownership, is the property of my house. She's not property, Giovanni repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He shifted his weight, his muscles tensing. He can't, Phylara whispered, her voice trembling, her hand finding Giovanni's arm. Giovanni, the bypass, it's not sealed, the port is open. If you move... I'm not moving, Giovanni said, his eyes locked with Zarek's. Zarek laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. You believe you have a choice? He raised the weapon. You are a mechanic, a fixer. You are nothing. Your defiance is noted. He aimed the weapon square at Giovanni's back. This is set to pain compliance, Zarek informed him, as if speaking to a child. Your primitive human nervous system will find it educational. For the last time, step away. Go to hell, Giovanni breathed. Zarek scoffed, so be it. Fired. A bolt of pure, white-hot energy slammed into Giovanni's back. It was not a laser. It was not a bullet. It was a focused neurological storm. Giovanni roared, a sound of pure animalistic agony that seemed to shake the tools on the wall. His entire body locked rigid, electricity coursing through every nerve ending, turning his blood to fire and his bones to liquid hot lead. Phylara screamed. Zarek watched, his expression cold. Any Sidonian, any sane creature would have collapsed, a twitching ruin on the floor. Giovanni didn't fall. He roared again, his head thrown back, his teeth bared. But instead of pulling away from the pain, he pressed himself closer to Phylara, his body a solid, defiant shield over her. His hand, clamped over the exposed port on her chest, tightened. This was the core of the man. This was the humanity moment that aliens could never ever understand. It was not logic, it was not tactics, it was pure, unadulterated stubbornness. He had a job to do. The bypass, he gasped, his voice a strained, tortured rasp. The energy was still coursing through him, a continuous, agonizing stream. It's not sealed, it's exposed. I have to cover it, keep it stable. His hand, his body, had become the final component. He wasn't a wire, he was a shield and a clamp. He was taking the full, agonizing pain compliance blast and using his own stubborn will against the raw energy to maintain pressure and cover on the delicate mechanism in her chest. This act of pure, irrational human defiance stunned Zarek. He stared, his weapon still firing, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. This primitive should be unconscious. He should be begging. Instead, he was enduring. Giovanni! Phylara cried out, her own terror forgotten, replaced by a new fierce emotion. She saw the sweat flying from his hair, the cords of his neck standing out, the inhuman tremor in his muscles as he fought to stay upright. Zarek, stop it, you're killing him. He is defying, Zarek hissed, his own composure cracking. This was impossible. He increased the power. Giovanni bellowed, his back arching, but his hand remained steady. I got you, he ground out, his words for Phylara alone. I got you. Zarek, furious at this creature's defiance, finally stopped the blast. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by Giovanni's ragged, painful gasps. The smell of ionized air and burnt fabric filled the shop. Giovanni was still in place, his body trembling violently, but his hand was an iron clamp on her chest, protecting her. His defiance is irrelevant, Zarek snarled, his pride wounded. He raised his weapon again, this time aiming for Giovanni's head. He has damaged the unit. He has voided his life privilege. Zarek, his composure shattered, pointed at his guards. Take the boy and retrieve the unit, now. This was his mistake. He thought the fight was over. He thought the human was broken. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. As one guard moved for Kale, the boy, who had seen his mother in pain and his friend attacked, did the only thing a mechanic's apprentice could. He grabbed the heaviest, most primitive tool he could find, a solid steel, human-made torque wrench, and threw it with all his might. The wrench spun end over end, striking the guard in the back of his armored knee. The guard stumbled, his perfect Sidonian discipline broken, roaring in surprise. That was all the opening Phylara needed. She too had been stunned, but as she watched Giovanni sacrifice himself, as she watched him endure a pain that should have destroyed him, all to cover her, Something new had happened. The governor was gone, the kill switch was shielded, the new bypass was active. And her Mark IV heart, her obsolescent engine, was responding to her rage. She felt it, a surge of power, of strength so profound it was like a drug. It wasn't just adrenaline, it was her own vitality, her own military training, undiluted, unthrottled. It was a race car engine, finally hitting the red line. "Giovanni," she whispered, her voice a low, lethal growl. She looked at the workbench. The high-frequency debonder and a plasma solder were still there, still hot. As the second guard reached for her, Philara moved. She was a green and white blur. She grabbed the ignited solder. The guard hadn't even registered her movement before she was on him. She didn't stab. She was precise. She slammed the white-hot tip of the solder against the guard's weapon hand. He shrieked, a high, un-Sidonian sound as the armor's joint seals melted and his weapon clattered to the floor. She kicked him, a high, powerful Sidonian kick in the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. Zarek, his weapon still aimed at Giovanni's head, froze in shock. Philara stepped off the bench, landing silently. She was no longer a victim. She was a warrior. She stood over Giovanni, shielding him, the plasma solder held like a blade. Her antennae were rigid, her solid black eyes were lethal, and her skin, flushed with power, seemed to glow. "Get away from him," she commanded. Zarek's face was a mask of disbelief. "Philara, what is this? Your implant. It's functioning." "He fixed me," Philara told him, her voice a predator's purr. She took a step toward him. The other guard, the one Kale had hit, was now raising his own weapon. Philara moved. She was no longer a brawler. She was an officer. She used the solder's heat shield to parry his weapon arm up, then jammed the white-hot tip against the softer, unarmored seal at his throat. He collapsed, gurgling, clutching his neck. She turned back to Zarek, 2 guards down, her son safe, the human breathing alive behind her. "He fixed me," she repeated, advancing on her ex-bondmate, "by breaking you." Zarek finally understood. He had lost. The animal, the primitive, the filth. They had beaten his perfect technology. He raised his weapon at her. "Then you will die with him. Broken property." He fired. Philara, running on high-octane Mark IV strength, sidestepped the blast, the energy bolt scorching the wall where she had been. She was on him before he could fire again. She didn't use the torch. She used her fist. She put all her new, unbound, military-trained strength into a single, clean, Sidonian martial arts blow to his jaw. Zarek, high-ranking officer of the Sidonian fleet, dropped like a sack of rivets. The shop was suddenly blessedly silent, save for 3 men groaning, 1 child crying, and 1 human, his body still smoking, gasping for air on a workbench. Just as the door chimed, and a squad of panicked station security officers, alerted by the weapon discharges, flooded the room. The cleanup was a bureaucratic nightmare and a personal mess. Station security, upon seeing a high-ranking Sidonian officer and his guards being held at bay by a woman with a soldering iron and a human mechanic with 3rd-degree burns, was understandably confused. Philara, however, was a new creature. Her voice was cold, precise, and absolute. She didn't plead, she gave a statement. She handed over Zarek's pain compliance weapon. She told them to scan her Mark IV implant for unauthorized military-grade control hardware. She filed charges of assault, illegal restraint, and attempted murder. Zarek, in binders, his jaw swelling, could only stare, his perfect world in ruins. His obsolescent victim had just become his impeccable accuser. It was hours later. The shop was a wreck. Security had gone. Zarek and his guards were in a holding cell, pending a very awkward diplomatic call to the Sidonian fleet. Kale, after the adrenaline crash, was fast asleep again, this time on a pile of clean rags in the back office, the fixed grav racer clutched in his hand. Giovanni was sitting on the stool, shirtless. His back was a raw, red and black landscape of agony. Philara was standing in front of him, her uniform now resealed. She was dabbing a sterile, high-tech biogel onto the burns, her touch feather-light. He winced, a sharp hiss. "I am sorry," she murmured. "I am not." "A mechanic," he grunted, a shadow of his old humor. "It's fine. It's just a burn." "It is not just a burn, Giovanni. He tortured you, and you did not let go." "I told you," he said, his voice rough. "Had to cover the port, keep it stable. Job's not done till the job's done. He tried to shrug and winced again. She stopped, her hand hovering over his shoulder. Why? He turned his head, looking at her over his shoulder. Her face was earnest, her solid black eyes searching his. The shock was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound intensity. Why what? Why fix it? Why endure that? For me? You do not even know me. Giovanni turned back, staring at his workbench. He thought for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe because I hate bullies. Maybe because I hate unbreakable things. But mostly, he looked down at his own hands, still stained with her biogel and his own soot. Mostly because a little boy who trusts me asked me to. And because you didn't deserve a leash. He was just a mechanic. He saw a problem. He fixed it. Philara moved from behind him. She stood in front of him, so close her knees were almost touching his. He looked up at her, the green-skinned, red-haired alien. She was, he realized, beautiful. Not just exotic beautiful, but strong, resilient, and powerful. He fixed me, she had said. She was watching him, her antennae twitching, a Sidonian sign of curiosity, analysis. Your engine, she said, her voice soft. It is very loud. He chuckled, then coughed. Yeah, well, human heart, we run hot. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, as if handling one of his delicate tools, Philara raised her hand. She didn't touch his burned back, or his face. She placed her hand, her long green fingers spread wide flat on his bare chest, right over his heart. Giovanni tensed. His heart, his hot human heart, gave a painful, powerful lurch beneath her palm. She held it there, her head tilted, her black eyes unblinking. She was listening to him just as he had listened to her. Her antennae quivered. It is very strong, she murmured. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. And very fast. Giovanni's own hand, the calloused human mechanic's hand, came up. He didn't pull hers away. He covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm more firmly against his skin. His heart beat against her hand. Thump, 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 a steady, powerful analog rhythm. So is yours, Philara, he whispered. Now. 6 months later, the smell of Giovanni's workshop was the only scent Philara associated with the concept of home. It no longer smelled of grime and solvents. Now it smelled of safety. It smelled of hot metal, which was the smell of creation, and a faint, clean scent of the bar soap he used. It smelled, she thought, like him. She leaned against the doorway, her arms crossed, watching him. He was at the bench, hunched over another project, the bright green lamp illuminating the intense, analytical set of his bearded face. He was shirtless as he usually was in the shop's heat. The sprawling, jagged burn scar on his back, a permanent map of his sacrifice, was a pale silvery pink against his olive skin. It was, in her opinion, the most beautiful, most honorable marking she had ever seen. Cale sat on the stool opposite him, no longer silent. The child chattered, a high, piping mix of Sidonian and, now, station standard, pointing at the components. And this one, Gio? This one makes it fast? This one makes it turn, Giovanni rumbled, his voice full of that easy, patient warmth Philara had come to adore. He held up a tiny, intricate gyroscope. Fast is nothing without control, capisci? Capisci, Cale repeated, giggling. Cale's nightmares were gone. He was a different child, bright, loud, and confident. He was the son of a warrior and, in all but blood, the apprentice of a master mechanic. Giovanni caught her eye, and the smile he reserved for his work and his apprentice softened, growing into something else. Something just for her. Hey, he said, you're back. The station administrator was long-winded, Philara said, walking into the shop. She ran a hand over Giovanni's shoulder as she passed, her green fingers tracing the edge of the scar. He leaned into her touch, a simple domestic act that was still a quiet miracle to her. She sat on the edge of the other workbench, the one that had been her operating table, her altar. Any word? He asked, his voice low, his attention back on his work. Yes, she said, the last thread had been cut. The Sidonian fleet has, in its infinite wisdom, concluded its investigation. And Zarek is retired. He has been permanently reassigned to a remote monitoring station on Sida's third uninhabited moon, a private post for health reasons. Giovanni snorted, soldering a wire. A prison. Worse, Philara said, a small, cold smile on her face. It's a prison of his own pride. The official report states that his military-grade hardware was functionally defeated by primitive analog-based interference. His perfect technology was undone by a human with a hammer. She paused. They are, to put it in your terms, pissed, but they are more embarrassed. He will never be allowed in polite society or a command chair again. His name is a joke. Good, Giovanni said, the word a final, grim punctuation. He finished the connection and pushed the new, complex toy, a bipedal walking mech, toward Kale. Go on, Piccolo. Test it in the corridor, but not near Administrator Borum's office. Yes, Gio. Kale scooped it up and ran, the toy already whirring. The shop was suddenly intimately quiet. Giovanni stood, stretching his back, wincing as the scar tissue pulled. Philara was off the bench instantly, her hands on his waist. You are in pain, she murmured. It's just stiff, he said. Let me, she insisted. Her hands were strong, her touch no longer brittle. She began to massage the muscles around the scar, her thumbs finding the knots. He groaned, the sound low and appreciative, and leaned his head back against her shoulder. That's good, he breathed. I have adapted, she said. My Mark IV is not just strong, it is precise. I can feel everything, every misfire. He chuckled, turning in her arms to face her. Speaking of misfires, he tapped the spot over her heart. It's been a week. Time for a tune-up. This was their ritual, this was their intimacy, born from that first terrifying operation. Philara smiled. It was a slow, sensual expression that was all for him. Her solid black eyes, which he had once thought cold, now held a universe of warmth. She unsealed the front of her simple off-duty tunic, baring the skin over her heart, the faint, identical scar that mirrored his. I have been feeling a stall, she purred, when I am away from you for too long. Is that right? He murmured, his voice gone rough. His hand, so large and calloused, splayed on her chest, his thumb stroking the scar. Let's take a listen. He didn't grab the acoustic sensor, not anymore. He leaned in, turning his head, and pressed his ear flat against her skin, listening. His beard was a rough, pleasant tickle. His hair was soft beneath her fingers as she cupped the back of his head. She felt his breath, hot on her skin. She felt his hand slide from her chest, around her ribs, his thumb brushing the underside of her breast. It sounds fast, he rumbled, his voice vibrating through her. It is responding to the mechanic, she whispered, her antennae quivering. Her unthrottled heart was a drum, a powerful Mark IV race engine, and he was the only one who knew how to redline it. It's perfect, he said. He wasn't talking about the machine. He lifted his head and kissed her, his mouth claiming hers with the same quiet, possessive confidence he used on his tools. It was a mechanic's kiss, practical, thorough, and designed to fix the distance between them. She responded with the full, unbound strength of her new life, her hands moving from his hair, down his chest, to the waistband of his overalls. The bench is clear, she breathed against his lips. Giovanni looked at the heavy steel workbench where he had, 6 months ago, saved her life. It was a place of pain, of terror. He lifted her, his arms bunching, and sat her on it, reclaiming the space, turning a memory of agony into a throne of intimacy. He stood between her knees, his hands on her thighs. Are you sure, he asked, his dark eyes searching hers. This place, Philara said, her voice dropping, is where my life began. She pulled him closer, her Sidonian body molding against his human one. It is where the mechanic fixed me, and I am in desperate need of another diagnostic. He growled, a low human sound of pure possession, and lowered his head, pressing his lips to the scar over her heart. I'm here, he murmured against her skin, his hand steady, his touch sure, and I'm not letting go. In the warm, cluttered shop, surrounded